Hey guys, this is Connor with Doc Waterloo. Further to an article or a blog post that I put up just today, I'm going to shoot this video just giving you an example of all the factors that can go into an injury process, even for a relatively simple injury like a disc injury or a tweaked knee or something like that. Just because people don't give enough credit to injuries for being complex, and if they're nothing else, they are complex. And usually the issue is that we can't consider enough factors, or we don't think about enough of the factors on an ongoing basis to really prevent injuries in the first place. And when we do have an injury, we think, oh, I moved this way and this hurt my back, or I moved this way and this hurt my knee, or I was in this accident and that's why my neck hurts. It's possible. I mean, those are definitely the straw that broke the back. But there are usually lots of other things that go into an injury like that. And if you're just thinking about the injury event, you're not doing yourself any favors moving forward. You're just going to predispose yourself to further injuries. And it's important to consider as many factors as you can all the time. So to illustrate, I have taken a few minutes drawing up a board, a little web of factors that might contribute to a pretty basic injury. So something I see all the time in the clinic are disc injuries. You can see here I've got our injury events, so it can be really common things like bending, like lifting. People do it all the time, putting socks on or putting shoes on, just because it's a bending, twisting, pulling kind of thing. Shoveling, raking, transitions from a chair out of a chair or into a car, that kind of thing. People do it in very routine ways. This is where people stop analyzing things, are these black bubbles here. So they know that they have an injury, it's probably confirmed through an MRI or an X-ray or something like that, and they know when it occurred because they bent over and all of a sudden their back hurt, and it's hurt ever since, and so it must be that thing. And everything else in red here are factors that contribute, that usually go under the radar, fly under the radar. So first things first, diet, huge factor in almost any injury, because if we're hypercaloric for any length of time, meaning eating too many calories for our current body weight or for our current metabolism, I can assume that you're overweight. And from being overweight, I can assume that your spine is under greater loads than it's probably meant to bear on a day-to-day basis. I can assume that the weight is distributed more poorly than if you were carrying just a moderate amount of body fat. I can assume that extra weight is going to lead you to poorer spinal positions. Extra body weight definitely pulls you out of proper posture in most cases. And I can assume that your activity is going to drop a little bit too, because carrying too much weight is extra work and it's tiring and uncomfortable in a lot of cases. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you can be hypocaloric, meaning you're not consuming enough calories, and then what you have is no ability to recover or repair injuries or stresses on a day-to-day basis. And when you consider that we're always stressing our body and we're always minutely damaging things, we need that recovery to continue all the time. So if we have a break from that, that's when things accumulate, and that's when disc injuries become more likely. And dieting, being hypocaloric, crash dieting, cleansing, whatever you want to call it, it's also a stress on the body. You just don't have enough resources to continue to process things the same way that you were before. So it is a stress. Hydration also feeds into diet. A minute drop in hydration, just 1 to 3%, I think, you're going to see a decline in physical ability and in cognitive abilities. So your ability to move safely goes out the window. And when you consider that most of your soft tissues and things like discs are largely composed of fluids or water, dehydrating yourself is not going to do you any favors in terms of tissue health. Posture is obviously a big one that people don't really want to confront in most cases. But bad posture contributes to a lot of overuse and muscle imbalances, and those muscle imbalances are often the things that lead you down the path to a disc injury. They put you in those bad positions in the first place. Bad posture can sap your strength, or good posture can improve your strength. Bad posture immediately makes you less flexible or less mobile. immediately loads your spine in a less efficient way, degrading the spine a little bit faster. Immediately creates more tissue tension than you would have if you had a better posture, and it immediately changes your gait. And when you consider that every step could be a possible injury event, that's a big deal. Stress is another huge one, obviously, but people don't analyze it as in depth as they should. The way that stress could affect you in this regard could lead to water retention. There's another weight gain and some confusion about whether or not you're hydrated or not. Could lead to fat gain, because we all know how evil cortisol is for fat gain and for muscle loss. Again, that cortisol it's going to lead you into a catabolic state much of the time, and it's going to be very hard to preserve or build muscle. Oftentimes when we're psychologically or physically stressed to a greater degree, our activity just drops completely. You lose the motivation to go to the gym, to go for walks, to do things to preserve your body like that. Stress immediately leads to postural changes. Anyone that works at a desk can attest to that. But all you really have to do is tell someone something that they don't want to hear, and you can see just how quick the shoulders shoot up to around the ears, and just how quick they hunch forward in a defensive posture. But people live like that all the time. Most people do. Immediately we can see a tissue tension increase when stress increases. Immediately we can see a drop in recovery when stress increases, because again, we're just sapping the system and not feeding back into it. Immediately sleep quality or sleep duration drops, just because again, our body is the hormonal milieu that goes along with being chronically stressed, does us no favors in that regard. With age, a lot of people are going to blame age without thinking about any factors that actually go into the aging process. But the age part is a number. What you do as you approach those greater numbers is the real problem, or the real boon, because as time goes on, aerobic conditioning typically drops, and I think maybe part of that is going to be because of aging itself, but certainly a huge part of it is that we drop our activity as we get older. Maybe you have fewer chances to be active, maybe you have less motivation to be active, you're involved in fewer sports, you don't have recess, that kind of thing. But definitely activity drops, and aerobic conditioning typically drops. And aerobic conditioning is our means of repairing damaged tissues. So when you consider that maybe this disc could have repaired before it actually got to a herniated point, or before it actually bulged or something like that, but your conditioning wasn't adequate in order for your body to do that, that's a bit of a tragic event. Also, mobility and strength tend to decrease as we age, and again, that's just because we're not. As we age, we put ourselves in fewer and fewer positions. We try to push our range of motion a little less, and muscle mass, if left alone and not challenged, is going to decrease as you age too. And if that muscle mass decreases and that strength decreases, your ability to protect your spine goes out the window for sure. So this is a very brief example, but everything that's on this board here could be expanded on. Everything that I've counted as a factor here has multiple factors of its own. It's important to consider that injuries, even in simple cases like this, where there's an injury event that you can blame, are not simple. And we need to consider as many of those factors as possible on a daily basis. Take care of as many of them as possible, and make sure that we're doing as much as we can to prevent injuries in the first place, and definitely make our recovery better when we do incur them.